Hey everyone, it's Justine and welcome. I'm excited to be guesting here on the MFT channel. I'm going to be making a fun set of cards that you can make with some really everyday My Favorite Things products. So I don't know about you, but I love the STAX dies. I love squares and circles and hexagons and rectangles and all of those fun shapes, and I've accumulated quite the stash along the way. Now you can pick any shape or size to do these cards, and I'm going to make a variety for you. So I'm going to be cutting these out actually using some masking paper, and I'm going to be using these here so that I'm able to form masks on top of my cards so I can blend. So the important thing is that you have enough room on the sides there that you don't get any on your white cardstock. So if you have a smaller shape than the panel you're working with, for example, I'm working with 4 by 5 1/4, you may want to add some extra masking tape there on the sides so that you don't get any on your cardstock. Now for all 5 cards that I'm creating, I'm using the same color blend. I'm using some Distress Oxides here, and I am going to be using 3 different colors. I'm going to be using Fossilized Amber, Spiced Marmalade, and Picked Raspberry, and I'm going to be going within the mask. So I'm doing the same thing to all 5 of the cards. So I'm only going to show the ink blending once here using this shape, and then I'll let you know which dies I use to achieve each shape on each card. So this one here was the Stitch Tag die, and I am going in at the top, and I want to create sort of a lighter to darker, almost like an ombre look, going from yellow, orange to pink, so more of a sunset or sunrise or whichever one. So I'm just going in a circular motion. I always try to start a little bit off of the cardstock and work my way in. I use a fairly light hand, and I have to say that Distress Oxides are a lot more forgiving than the standard Distress inks, so don't worry too much if you get a harsh line here or there. You're able to buff them out quite easily. So now I'm going ahead to remove the mask, and you see I have this really fun 1-layer look on the cards. If you happen to get any on your cardstock, you can use a Tombow sand eraser here to get off light colors to make them a little bit less noticeable, or they might even make them disappear. So as I mentioned, I don't want to keep you here all day, so I'm just going to show you the final reveal because masking to me is kind of like magic. So for this one here, I used the Mod Rectangle die, which was a really fun set that I got not too long ago actually. And it's sort of a rectangle, but it has 2 rounded edges on it. And this is going to give you a much larger space than the tag, of course, on the front of your card. So for my next shape, I am using the Stitched Tag Corner Rectangle Stacks. This one here is super fun, almost like an octagon, but rectangular. And I like the fact that it takes up a good amount of my card as well. And I had that placed a little bit towards the top. The last ones here are pretty easygoing. These are a hexagon shape in the stacks, and I just love how versatile they can be. Like, I love using them to die cut for frames, and I love using them for things like this with masking. It just lets you get so much more use out of them. The last one here is a very simple circle die. This one here was a stitched stack circle die. Now, this is one of my favorite stamp sets from the new release called Anything But Basic Friendship stamp set. I love MFT's sentiments when it comes with this really pretty brush font, and then it has the smaller sentiment to go with it so that you can mix and match to create tons of different ones. And I'm using my Misty here to stamp because I've spent so much time on my background, I don't want to accidentally have a slip when I'm using a block. So I am going to be using some black ink here to stamp the friend, and then I'm going to go ahead and stamp the coordinating sentiment that will go with it. The coordinating sentiment that I had chosen for this stamp is another long distance friendship stamp set, and I have a lot of friends that live overseas because I lived overseas for quite a few years, and so I love to send these ones here, and it's so fun. I love how there's so many friendship sentiments to go with this stamp set. And I'm just going to ink it up and stamp it, and it says here, in my imaginary neighborhood, you would live right next door. Now I'm going to take this next stamp set here, which also came out during the March release, called Beautiful Day, and these have some really fun, pretty florals that are doodly and sort of whimsical, and I'm just going to add some of those here onto the card, and I'm going to stamp these as well. The next stamp I wanted to use is called Yay for You. Now before I get started with stamping those, I wanted to actually add a little bit of water on top of my panels. I do want them to have that Distress Oxide look where they have that oxidization and those really fun bubbles there. So I'm going to spray that with my Distress sprayer and let these dry before I continue stamping. So I'm going to go ahead and pair this yay, and I'm going to use the outline of it. There are coordinating dies as well, so if you feel like you'd like to have a coordinating die instead in a certain color of cardstock, you can cut those out as well with the coordinating dies. So I'm going to stamp this once again with black ink and stamp that onto my paper, and it says, "Yay, commencing happy dance." How cute is that? Now, I did mention the coordinating dies, so I did think this one looked a little bit boring. I thought the yay got a little lost in all the color, so I decided to go ahead and die cut this using some black cardstock, and then I went ahead and I attached the letters on top of the stamp, so I had a nice stencil as to where to put them. I think it just makes it a little bit more bold, and it really makes that yay stand out and pop out against the color. For my third card here, I actually used some of these bunnies here, and they're absolutely adorable for Easter stamps. And this is from the Hoppy Friends stamp set. It's one of those smaller stamp sets too, so it's at a great price point. And I colored those using Copic markers. Because I'm not a coloring expert, however, I'm not going to show that on screen, although I do think these turned out quite well. I used just a mixture of some grays and some pinks here to create the bunnies. I also used the coordinating die cuts to cut them out, and then I'm going to use the Hoppy Birthday stamp set here, and I'm going to emboss this onto some black cardstock, and also emboss it with some white embossing powder, so that I can add that sentiment to the front of my card. So I just trimmed down my sentiment to a small rectangle here. I'm not too sure exactly how far I want it to stand out onto my card, so I just left it long for now, and then I'll cut it later when I mount it onto my card base and I figure out how I want it to be. So I decided to mount my sentiment onto some 3D foam tape so that I can slip the bunnies very neatly underneath into a little scene. So I'm grabbing both bunnies, I'm attaching them with some Tombow mono liquid adhesive so that they're facing each other, and they're just so cute. I love them. Now for card number 4, I'm going back to that beautiful day stamp. I had used that to make some embellishments on top of the friend card that I had made earlier. And I'm just going to stamp some of these fun whimsical flowers here and sentiments onto my tag. So this is going to be a nice clean and simple card when it's all finished. And it stays in that one layer, which is always a goal of mine, especially when it comes to mailing. I don't like to make my cards too heavy that I have to pay extra postage. So I have the 3 flowers. I just did a nice line there, and I love how the color on the tag makes them look colored as well. I'm going to go ahead and add my sentiment here, and I think this sentiment might be one of my favorites. Sending you a handmade hug. I absolutely love this sentiment because I love to send handmade hugs very much. Okay, now for my last card here, I placed a large block on top of my card so I would have the approximate size that I needed. I'm using Puppy Kisses. This is another March release, and it has all these really fun dogs on here, and I like how each one is very different from the other. I'm going to create sort of a collage background of all sorts of puppies to put onto my card. Now, you have to note that the card itself, the actual distressing, has to be dry at this point. So I had originally done my backgrounds one day and then went ahead and did this stamping on another day, but you could use a heat tool, of course, to dry your items. And I'm arranging them onto the block here so that they also go off of the color as well, because I think that's going to look really fun to have the white embossing not only on the color but on the card in a subtle white pattern also. So I inked everything up with some Versamark ink here so that I can do some embossing, just like I did with the sentiment. This time I'm also embossing in white, but this time onto colored and white cardstock versus black cardstock. I'm pushing down to get a nice firm impression, and anything coming off of my block I'm kind of just pushing down gently as well to make sure that that gets stamped. So I'm once again adding my white embossing powder on top. I generally don't like to show the same technique over and over again, so I'm just going to skip ahead to the heat embossing. And just as I did with the previous card, on a piece of black cardstock, I had embossed the sentiment in white that says, "You are my favorite human." I cut it down and then added that to the front of my card. Since I've already shown how to do this, I don't figure I need to waste your time to show you again. All right, so we're ready to put them all together. So I added each one of the cards onto a card base. My card base is a standard A2 card, so 4¼ by 5½ when folded, and I am adding them with Tombow Mono liquid adhesive, and I like the fact that I get this sort of white frame around them. That is definitely my style, and every card I do has this. I always work on a card panel, so that if I make a mistake, I'm not throwing out a whole card base, and I like that framed finished look. It's almost like I'm framing a picture when I'm all finished. Now I'm going to give you a final look at all of the cards, but before I do, I just need to cut down this sentiment here that I said I would do earlier in the video. So I just turned it over, grabbed my scissors, and then I just trimmed it along the card base so that it actually went right to the edge of the card base. So I hope you guys enjoyed this card tutorial today for MFT channel. I'm really excited every time I get to create on here with you. So I had this one here with the bunnies for Easter, a nice friendship card. We have a yay commencing happy dance, sending you a handmade hug, and then lastly, you are my favorite human. Such a cute little set and so many different options for a card that make them truly versatile so that you can get them out to friends or even give them as a gift pack. So if you're interested at all in checking out more videos by MFT, you can go ahead and subscribe to the channel or check out some additional videos here. Thanks so much for watching, everyone, and have a wonderful week.